So my presentation will probably be a little bit different than a lot of what you all see today. As Jack said, I'm an artist, and this past summer I had the opportunity to do an artist residency at Castle Butte Lookout. So I'm just going to give a little talk about my time there, what I was working on, the things I was thinking about, and what came from that. Open Air Montana is a arts organization based in Missoula that does a lot of artist residencies. They partner with different organizations, primarily in Montana. And artists apply to do roughly month-long artist residencies. They do one team partnered with the Selway-Bitterroot Frank Church Foundation. And it's a wilderness artist residency that's usually held in the Selway-Bitterroots. But the past couple of years, it's been at Castle Butte Lookout. I applied a couple times and I was waitlisted over and over. And I think it was partially because my application was so heavily about working with technology. But I outlined a lot of my experience in wilderness. So I really thought I was pairing that in an interesting way, but I think there was some skepticism. But I only put that out or bring that part up because it played an interesting role in like getting ready for this. I had been waitlisted this past summer and I got a phone call that was I had been put on a wait list, and they were basically like, the other person backed out. Could you go to the lookout like Sunday? This was like a Wednesday. I had some stuff, so I basically was like, I can do Wednesday. Like, give me 1 week. So I had 1 week to like prep to go totally off grid for 2.5 weeks or 3.5 weeks. But I do a lot of backpacking and spend a lot of time like disconnected. So yeah, but I came into this with a little less formulaic plan on what I was going to be making and doing while I was up there. So I approached it really as a time period to work on some things I was thinking about and just like deeply connect with that space. And yeah, I was strangely planning a unique class that I taught at WSU this past fall, called I'm blanking on the name right now, but it was histories and dreams of virtual reality in virtual reality. So it was looking at it was really secretly trying to get the students to think about speculative fiction as like almost a form of activism and like thinking about building a better future, but like hooked them with VR because they're all like hyped on VR. So we really we took like a deep look at the history of virtual reality's representation in speculative fiction. And we went all the way back to like Plato's allegory of the cave. So strangely, I spent a lot of time in this fire lookout, super disconnect, like, you know, no electric, no water. Most of you all know the gist of this. Reading a lot of science fiction about virtual reality. And at first that felt really strange and dissonant up there, but it really helped me. I think a lot of times when we're thinking critically about something, the ability to like really remove ourselves from it is helpful. So being up there disconnected, I strangely had cell signal in the lookout, like very little cell signal and only in the lookout. So that was actually like really great for me because I felt like it took me back to how I interacted with the internet in like the 90s, where it was the internet was a place you went, like, so you had to actively engage with it to access something. But now it's a place that we have to actively escape. I just included this quote from Adrienne Marie Brown that was like really shaping my thinking a lot up there. And initially I thought it was really just shaping my thinking about what I was reading and like planning. But this quote, if you're shaping the future, you are a futurist. She's a phenomenal writer. If you all are not familiar with emergent strategies, check it out. So around the lookout, like what was I starting to get inspired by as an artist? This lookout's no longer an active lookout. It's had been used as an artist residency the previous summer. And from the looks of all the logs and everything up there, it's not been used at all other than that for quite some time. It's set up to be able to be rented, but I don't think it's actively being rented. I'm not sure why. I could be wrong about that, but so there were lots of little things wrong or broken, and my background in construction, I just like it was hard for me not to like kind of fix things. But I didn't bring much. I mean, I had some like tools in my truck, just that's where they live. But I kept finding a lot of rusty nails around the lookout, just because there's been multiple lookouts at this location. And it was just something I mindlessly did in the mornings while I was like drinking my coffee and like walking around the lookout and such, or like throughout the day. I was gathering these rusty nails. And this felt so disconnected from what I was thinking about as an artist or anything up there. It was just something I was doing. And I grew up, my stepfather owned a construction development company. So I was on construction sites since I was like this young. And a job I used to be given was to pull nails out of boards and straighten them. And it was not a job. It was a way to keep a child occupied. But I found myself like instinctually doing that up there with these rusty nails. So it was just like accumulating a bunch of nails. And then I was using them to fix, like there was one window, like the window shade that was just barely connected and like flapping around. Found some scrap wood and fixed some things, hung things. But I started just really being into the textures and the forms of those bent rusty nails, and responding to them as like a material and like inspiration. And they also felt like a sign of like both fragility and resilience, like together, because like they were what was left from, decades and decades of human occupancy up there. You can argue European human occupancy up there, but they were also like so fragile and bent up and rusted and decayed. So it was like this back and forth. I am a sculptor and a media-based artist. I brought camera equipment and my background's photography. I plan to do a lot of 3D scanning up there, almost like gathering material to then create sculptures with once I got back. So I brought my camera, some rigs. I've got like, a Jackery box with a solar panel. So I was like, working with all these weird limitations where I had like a set amount of battery that I could charge throughout the day. It was easier for me to scan and photograph at night. So after the lights went down. So this is just kind of a look at like how I set the lookup as a studio. So these rusty nails, I knew I wanted to start 3D scanning them. And this is like a turntable. So the photogrammetry is a technique of 3D scanning where you take a whole bunch of photographs of an object from all different angles, and you use the like similar points to build a 3D model. It works the same way that moving image is made by sequential images, but instead of building a third dimension of time, you build a third dimension of depth. A whole nother ramble about that, but I'll try not to. So like I was saying, very limited access to what I could work with up there. I needed to stand these nails up to scan them. And I could this was something that like racked my brain for days. I remembered I had like a little tube of super glue in my first aid kit. That's really about all my first aid kit is. So put a little drop of super glue on there and like tried to glue it to this plastic, something in the rust and the nails and the CA glue had a chemical reaction. Instead of gluing it to that turntable, it melted the center of my turntable. So I kind of felt pretty defeated, couldn't, and it was when I was laying down for bed that night, I just remembered a sticky sensation on my hand from the hike I did that day. And then it hit me that there's pine pitch everywhere up there, and pine pitch has been used as, an adhesive for forever. So I started collecting the pine pitch. And then I think I took out the photo that looks like I've got like a nice bent spoon and a camp stove to melt this pine pitch. So that was like this really interesting like troubleshooting that I had to do up there. And like then that material became something else that I was working with, that pine pitch. So I was collecting a bunch of that, melting it down, using that as my glue to 3D scan like 50, 60 bent rusty nails. And then I would do like the computer intensive like processing of those scans at night, like as the sun was going down most days. And I would just work until I ran out of my batteries. So it was like this really interesting shift in how I worked. I collected a fair bit of that pine pitch and melted it down in, one of my little camp mugs and saved that because I noticed after that was melted and hardened, it became like a really nice material, very similar to amber, like which was kind of a duh moment once I thought about it. So I'm now starting to experiment with casting with that pine pitch. So I'm creating 3D models and sculptures from those scans that I'm creating silicone molds from and casting the pine pitch into it.
So the pine pitch is a lost wax?
I'm using it kind of like that. It's not quite a lost wax because I'm never using a wax. I'm 3D printing a form and then using silicone to make a mold of that, pulling the print out. But very similar. But instead of putting in like molten metal, I'm putting in molten pine pitch. Ooh, video didn't come through. Yes, it did. It just is for some reason animated now. So I picked a 3D scan that is a bit seasonal, and I'm gonna speed up and probably skip a few things. Well, it's not gonna play, but this was just demonstrating how the 3D scan is built. It starts with a sparse point cloud from the photos and builds tints. Spent a bunch of time hiking the burn areas up there. I was also really drawn to the the remnants of the burnt trees, and they often felt like monuments or memorials to that, like both the resilience and like the destructive power. Like it was a really complex, like counterintuitive and like yeah. So I started 3D scanning those two. And it was through some of those 3D scans, like the remnants left in the background, I started seeing the similarities in the structures of the bent rusty nails and the remnants of the forest. Or like remnants is not the word I should use there, but regardless, I'm not going to waste time tearing that apart. And then these are just pictures of that scanning process. This is like the result of one. This is like a detail shot of some of the texture that I was getting. I was really into the materials and textures. And after I ran out of my batteries, reading in the dark. So I started spinning, and I think I'm gonna have to skip this section. But if you want to read more, I started really thinking about the darkness in forests and how humans see and how animals see. Predators and prey see very differently. Like their eye systems are different, and humans kind of see like both. We see like predators during the day and like prey at night. So that's my teaser for that. Few images of the first sculptures on our roads. These are not the greatest photos of this, but I was running a little behind and packing it up and shipping it to an exhibition at Bob's Your Uncle in Missoula. So I kind of really ran with that like monumental feel that I was getting, like and tapped into some of that darkness and reflection that I was thinking about. And these are just some detail shots. That's like a black acrylic. This is right before it was polished. It becomes like this really interesting, strange black mirror. Yeah. So these are all plant-based resin prints that some or all of them will eventually be cast in that pine pitch. And then I threw this QR code up there. I did an interview for Open Air. If you want to read a little more about that, that's on their website. There's also links there to a recording of an artist talk I gave in Hamilton, like immediately after coming. Like I came down from the lookout, drove to Hamilton, gave a talk the next morning. Kind of a strange headspace. And there's a link to some writing that I published about that, the ways we see in the dark also in there. And that was my view while having my morning espresso while I was